Pulling rare cards from Pokemon packs is always fun and exciting, but lately it's actually become a real struggle to pull some of the top hits from the latest sets released by Pokemon. In the last few sets released by Pokemon, your ability to pull a special illustration rare or an SIR, which are generally seen as the top hits from each set, has gone down dramatically, and it's having an impact on collectors. In this video, we're going to look at the Scarlet and Violet era and how the pull rates have changed and how that's going to affect you as a collector moving forward. In the first 4 sets of the Scarlet and Violet era, as you can see on the chart, you had a 3.1% chance of pulling an SIR from any pack that you opened, which generally came out to about 1 in every 32 packs on average that you would see a special illustration rare and be excited because, hey, you got a great hit. With the release of Paradox Rift in late 2023, we saw a sharp decline in our ability to pull a special illustration rare from any of the packs released in that set. It went from roughly 3%, which with the specialty set of English 151, and went all the way down to 2.11%. And that percentage has gone down from every subsequent set since Paradox Rift. With the release of Stellar Crown in the last week, your ability to pull one SIR is on average 1 in every 90 packs. Compared to the beginning of the first 4 sets of Scarlet and Violet, it was 1 in every 32. So it's nearly 3 times as many packs on average to pull one special illustration rare today than it was in early sets released in Scarlet Violet era. When I first saw this graph, I assumed, okay, since my ability to pull a special illustration rare on average has gone down, that must mean these last few sets that have been released with a 2 to 1% chance of pulling an SIR, the top hit value must have increased. That was my original assumption, but looking at the next graph, I put an overlay of in today's value the top hit from each set. And what we find is that's kind of not really the case. There's one extreme outlier, which was the Greninja card from Twilight Masquerade. But when you remove that card as an outlier data source, the average value of the top hit SIR from all the sets in Scarlet Violet is around $81. If you took the average of all the sets other than Twilight Masquerade. Looking at this graph, we're comparing your ability to pull a special illustration rare, the percentage value, and comparing it against the value in dollars of the top hit from each of these sets. We're trying to see if there's a relationship between, okay, Pokemon, if we're going to be only have a 1% chance of pulling an SIR from the last 3 or 4 sets, how does that affect the value if there is a relationship of the top hit? What we're essentially asking is, as the SIR percentage goes down, does that mean the value of the top hit of those sets go up? Is there a negative correlation? And if you have fun looking at fancy charts and talking about Pokemon collecting, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps out. 1, there's a very weak negative correlation between the SIR percentage pull rate and the value of the top hit when you remove the Twilight Masquerade outlier. What does that mean? Effectively, what that means is there's not a strong relationship between the SIR pull rate going down and the value of the top hit going up. It's a rather small correlation. So there's not a strong relationship between those two variables. So we can conclude then that there are other variables that have an impact on the value of the top hit from each set. Let's just take a look at an example of the Greninja card itself, the one outlier. Why is this card valued so high compared to any other special illustration rare released in the Scarlet and Violet era? It's not because it had a low pull rate, because we know there's a very weak correlation between the pull rate percentage and its value. So there must be other reasons why Greninja is valued so high. So why is this card in such high demand? 1, I think subjectively, this artwork is probably some of the best artwork out of all the SIRs across all the Scarlet Violet sets. It looks cool, and that's, again, subjective opinion, right? Some of the other people are going to look at this card and say, you know what? I don't think it's that cool. But in my personal opinion, I think it's a cool looking card. Two, generally, we've seen that certain Pokemon perform better when it comes to the value of their card over a period of time. Greninja is one of those Pokemon. You got Pikachu, Charizards, some of the legendary Pokemon. They tend to do better in value because those cards are in higher demand because people want to collect them for their sets. So we have the subject and nature of the artwork. We have which the Pokemon itself actually comes with increases its value. In this particular card example, there is a 1.1% chance of you pulling a special illustration rare from Twilight Masquerade, but then out of all the special illustration rares released in Twilight Masquerade, your ability to now pull this card is very, very low. It's below 1% chance. On top of the fact that this is a very high desirable card because of its subjective artwork and that it's Greninja, that's most likely what's driving up the value of this particular card. What are some other short-term factors that affect the value of the Scarlet Violet set? Number one, demand. Like looking at some of the Scarlet Violet, looking at the previous graph, Scarlet Violet base set, the top hit's worth only $25. It's not in high demand. Compare that to English 151. The top hit is the SIR Charizard flying in the sky, and he's valued at 121. And today's as of date we're recording this video. So demand is going to have a huge impact on the value of each of these cards. And again, it's kind of that cliche. Supply is also going to have an impact. For example, the Obsidian Flame set. The special illustration rare Charizard, the top hit from that set, is only valued at $44 in today. In the Pokemon community, that card in particular has generally been seen as easy to pull. So if the card is easy to pull, there's a large supply and not a great demand for the card, because in my personal opinion, that card's kind of okay. You're seeing what we're seeing today with it only being valued at $44. And I believe another factor that's not really talked about a lot that affects the short-term value of a card is today's collectors are way more knowledgeable than they have been in the past. What do I mean by that? Before a set is released, we know what the artworks and what every single card is going to be in that set, whether it's English or Japanese Pokemon sets. Generally, as English collectors, we can see the artworks being released because that same artwork is used earlier in Japanese sets. Pokemon releases Japanese sets before English ones, so we know beforehand, hey, this card looks sick. I want Greninja. It's gonna look awesome on my collection, or it's gonna look awesome and have great value over time if that's something you care about, which is going to increase the hype and demand of that particular card when that set releases here in the United States. So now that collectors have all this knowledge and all this data in their hands before sets even released, it plays into that demand and increases the demand and hype for those particular cards, which is gonna affect the value of that card once the set is released. Now, looking at the long-term value of the Scarlet Violet set, this is gonna be a bit speculative, but based on the data that we have today, it appears that we're more than over halfway done with the Scarlet Violet era. In the Sword and Shield era, excluding your Trick or Treat or McDonald's sets, there were only 17 total sets, including the specialty ones, released in the Sword and Shield era, and we're at 10 releases total for Scarlet Violet. So what can we infer based on what we've learned in previous generations? In the Sword and Shield era, it's particularly known as having some pretty low pull rates. I mean, you literally have sets jokingly called Evolving Cries, Chilling Pain, released during that era. Why are they called that? Because it's been notoriously hard to pull the top cards from those sets. And I'll probably do a similar video as this one, looking at the data, but my preliminary research looked at pulling the top hits from those sets. It's in the low 1% chance range, which is what we're seeing similarly today in the Scarlet Violet era. We are now 3 to 5 years removed of the release dates of the Sword and Shield era, and some of the top hits from some of the more beloved sets in that era are easily triple digits in value. And that's not just looking at like Evolving Skies' Moonbryon at $880 today, but maybe there are other factors that affect the value over the long term. Now, maybe there's a factor of COVID. You know, in the Sword and Shield era, that's when COVID hit and everyone was indoors, and you know, Pokemon just collecting popped off because it became more mainstream. In the post-COVID era, the top hits from Sword and Shield have seen the highest prices they've ever been, especially in May and June of 2024. Correction on the screen there. They have slightly come down, but these cards have retained a lot of value and increased in value over time. Will we see that in the Scarlet Violet era? Another factor that can affect the value of certain Scarlet Violet sets over the long term is what we kind of talked about earlier, is the Charizard effect. 3 out of the 10 currently released Scarlet Violet sets, Charizard is the top hit. 30% of all the sets released in this particular era, Charizard is literally the top hit. Obsidian Flames, English 151, and Paldean Fates. And Charizard is one of those Pokemon that traditionally does very well over time because he's such a beloved and favorite Pokemon of many people. Because his demand is so high, he's going to be more valuable over time. It'll be interesting to see, though, how the Obsidian Flames Charizard performs over time, because out of those 3 sets that I named, he is the lowest at $44. But the other 2, in English 151 and Paldean Fates, the top hit Charizard is over $100 in today's value. And a third thing to consider when we look at the value of the Scarlet Violet era over its long term is how many freaking cards Pokemon is printing. From March 2023 to March 2024, Pokemon worldwide printed 11.9 billion with a B Pokemon cards. That doesn't mean they're all English, but you can assume that the Japanese and English amounts of that 11.9 billion are very, very high. And yes, not all those cards are going to have any value at all. But if there's a huge volume of cards printed over a long period of time, that may suggest that there'll be a larger supply of the top hits in general because of just how many have been printed over the volume, unless Pokemon has accounted for that. Maybe that's why the last sets since Paradox Rift, we've seen a sharp decline in the SIR. Maybe this is Pokemon trying to help collectors and keep the value of these cards over time, because they're looking at, okay, we increased year over year, 22% more Pokemon cards were printed year over year, the most ever before. If we just shove a bunch of Pokemon cards into the market, it's going to have negative impact on the value of these cards. It's harder now more than ever to pull the top hit or any of the special illustration rares from the Scarlet and Violet set. And there's some implications on its short-term and long-term value that we've discussed. For you as a collector, there's a lot of factors that are going to determine like your ability to increase your collection, get the cards that you'd like, or if you care about the value of them over time, how they're going to perform. Looking into the future, it'll be very interesting to see if Pokemon will keep the low pull rate percentage or bring it back up to 3%. And we'll get to find out if that has affects the value of these cards over the long term. The other Pokeboys and I run a Livebreak / Rip and Ship on TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube Live on this channel. So if you're ever interested in any of that other content when we go live, make sure you check the video description below or go to our website at pokeboystrading.com, where you can purchase Pokemon packs from us, Japanese and modern English, and we'll have a great time ripping them open packs together. See you there.